This is my first take. I may take another take, and I may use this take. Today, I'm going to be sharing the meaning of life. That is quite a statement. And I don't know the meaning of life, but I'm going to be sharing my perspective on a concrete set of ideas that I think, I hope might make the meaning of life a little bit more understandable, specifically for people who are focused on asking themselves questions about the meaning of life. So, what do we mean when we say the meaning of life? What do we mean by meaning? I think there are a few overlapping definitions that probably are all rolled into one when we're thinking about the meaning of life. So there can be the definitional meaning of meaning. So in some ways that's the question I'm asking right now about the word itself. What is the meaning of this word? Can you please describe what is intended to be conveyed through the use of this word using other words, so not using the word itself? If generally when definitions include the word being defined, they feel a little bit reflexive or reflective, I think reflective, I'm not sure in that context, but yeah, I think reflective, and they seem like they're missing something, because you're really trying to understand this word in terms outside of itself. If you use the term itself, you're kind of obviously you're not. There's a certain point you can't get past, because you're relying on a more intuitive or implicit understanding or a contextual understanding. And if you want to have an explicit definition, generally you want to use words that don't include the word itself. So there's the definitional definition or meaning of meaning. Then there's also, I think, like the causal or explanatory use of the word meaning. Like, what is the meaning? When you say, you wouldn't really say what's the meaning of a car, but you could potentially, have like, what's the purpose, right? Purpose. So that's so the causal definition of meaning, the causal meaning of meaning could be something like purpose. That could be a useful synonym. Meaning, what's the purpose of a car? Well, to get from point A to point B, to have something you enjoy sitting in, driving around in, to carry your stuff around, to go faster than you would be able to walking. This is perhaps the purpose definition of meaning. And then, so there's definition and purpose. And that's kind of what we mean when we say, what's the meaning of my life? Like, what is the definition and purpose of my life? Usually probably a little bit more towards purpose, but there's a reason we don't just say, what's the purpose of life, or what's the purpose of my life? People do often say that, but the term, what is the meaning of life, definitely has a more, it's more of a classic question or topic. But so there's something else going on when we're talking about what is the meaning of life, and that's kind of what what I wanted to talk about or share my perspective about. And I think to make that more clear, I think it's helpful to talk first about the more concrete definitions or meanings of meaning, of definition and purpose. Because very often I think there's this third element, which I think is more at the root of what we're talking about, which is very related to definition and purpose, but maybe arises from them and is greater than the sum of its parts, and is sort of ephemeral and I believe spiritual and ineffable. I can't speak of it perfectly. So, and I think it also can be very confusing because I think we also often conflate in ourselves, we mix up or confuse in ourselves our search for definition and purpose, and then this third piece. Purpose, also like definition, generally to be satisfying to us, relies on terms outside of itself. So generally we can think of an intrinsic purpose, and this is kind of where I'm getting with this whole discussion, but generally in a more colloquial sense or more common sense, when we talk about the car, what's the purpose of the car, you wouldn't necessarily say to drive. I mean, you could say to drive, but then you would just say, okay, what's the purpose of driving, right? So you're kind of just pushing it one step further down the line. But so you say, what's the purpose of driving or in a car? You want to use terms outside of driving in the car itself. You want to talk about, okay, I want to go to the store. So that's something that's outside of the car, which you're using the car to get to or to accomplish or to live more fully, or to solve a problem, something like that. So again, this common theme of purpose and definition, in order to have satisfying definitions or satisfying explanations of purpose, we rely on terms outside of the thing we're seeking to define or explain the purpose of. So thinking about these constructions or these ways of understanding meaning, and thinking about our life, and say, okay, what's the explanation, definition, purpose of our life? Just talking about these specific ways in which we talk about purpose and meaning, we would then look for something outside of our life or outside of life to define and give purpose to life. So if you think about the universe or all of reality, I think that for this term, some people would consider, universe all of reality, but it could be multiverses, could be a simulation, could be, divine creation. For right now, I think it's kind of irrelevant what specific story we want to tell ourselves about how we've ended up here, and instead just conceive with me of the conception of all of reality. So if you believe simulation, it's this simulation and all of the simulations beneath us, all the way down to base reality, everything that exists. If you believe in divine creation, all of divine reality and all the manifestations of the world. If you believe in something like an unregulated machine, or an organic spontaneous creation, sort of a more like just the Big Bang happening and there is no explanation, just all the universe, all the multiverses, whatever it is, all of reality, right? That just whatever the narrative that we connect to most, just all of reality. Our life in relationship to, let's say, the planet or solar system, certain religious concepts, whatever kind of next step you want to use as a definition or an explanation for the purpose of our lives, it's going to be something outside of our lives, right? If we're talking about these literal forms of meaning as definition or purpose. So okay, so we have our lives, and then something outside of our lives would be a hypothetical thing that would or would not give meaning, give definition or purpose to our lives. And if you extrapolate that outwards, ultimately, whatever that thing that we would be serving to give our lives purpose, or that could be explaining, could be an explanatory foundation to make sense of our lives, that thing in itself would then in turn, the question could be asked, okay, what's the definition and purpose of this next order of things? So, why do I drive my car? To go to the store. Why do I want to go to the store? To blah, 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 to blah, 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 to blah, 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 to blah, 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 etc. This chain, logically, if you're just talking about explicit chains of definition and purpose, would end up at what is the definition or purpose of all of reality. That's where it would lead to. And then we come back. This is, to me, the exciting part. One of the exciting parts is, okay, so definition and purpose, in order to be coherent in the ways in which we communicate, in linear verbal senses, rely on terms to be not reflective or not circular, not reflexive, not reflective, one of those, to be not a loop, right? To make sense, relies on terms outside of itself, outside of that which is being defined or that which is being explained or given purpose to. So the question of definition or purpose of all of reality is in fact not really a question. Because there can be no such thing outside of all of reality. Because any thing or lack of thing in this context is encapsulated in this concept of everything that there is. So it's not that there is no definition or there is no purpose to all of everything. It's that doesn't make sense as a thing to ask. So in math class in college, one of my professors, he was talking about, I think we were talking about like set theory, which is, doesn't really matter, but it's basically like lists of numbers. And he was talking about different kinds of zeros. And he wrote a few different kinds of zeros. He wrote 0 on the board, which is basically 1 less than 1, right? 1 minus 1. It's 0 as we typically think about it. It's 1 less than the lowest integer, 1. Then he wrote like brackets or parentheses around it, basically signifying the null set, which means a hypothetical list with nothing in the list. Slightly different kind of 0 perhaps. And then he erased the board as a blank board. So in this context, the kind of 0 that the kind of 0 that I'm talking about with the purpose and definition for all reality is like erasing the board. It's not like there was a 1 and then we minused it away. It's not like, oh, there could be a definition or purpose for all reality. It's like it's that these things that we're thinking about, definition and purpose, these are human contraptions, devices that we've used because they're useful in our lives. They are useful very clearly in the way we're living, but they, in terms of like extrapolation, in terms of all reality, it isn't actually a question. It's not that the answer is that there's none. It's more none than none. So there's nothing to be there or not there. It just doesn't make any sense to ask what's the purpose or definition of everything. It isn't a coherent question. Now, I think that may not necessarily be the most satisfying answer to some of you watching, but I'm not quite finished. What I hope, and what this has given me some of, this has given me a little bit of peace in terms of this realization. It's given me a little bit of peace in regards to certain types of mental, like seeking to understand certain things about life or the world. Because it's not that there is nothing to be sad about. There's a lot to be sad about, for sure. But the fact that there is no definition or purpose to all of reality is nothing to be sad about. Because it's like saying, like, I'm sad because oh, that's very sad. That's as much sense as it makes to be sad about. So then we're not. This video is, I think, especially designed for people who have that feeling of like the meaning, the search for meaning, right? And then we like, oh, there's no point to anything. And like, oh, that's why I'm sad. That's not why you're sad, because is also not why you're sad, right? They make equal amounts of sense. They both make no sense. So it's not about sense, right? But there is something about definition and purpose which is very close and very overlapping and very intertwined with the thing in us that is sad. There's something about those useful concepts which we then project onto larger questions, and then apply our lack of ability to grab onto that to our sadness. And it makes total sense why we do that. The thing itself doesn't make sense, but it makes sense why we do it. And I would say that or at least I feel that I understand to some degree why I do it, and I imagine there are overlapping, like that other people have had similar experiences, and so if definition and purpose are not what we're after in relationship to these questions, I guess what I would say we're after is the emotional presence with the unreality of these questions, right? Like the state of being where those questions fade away, and that is more true because we can see with our mind, like with our rational mind, that those questions don't actually exist. So when you're in the emotional state, when you're in this state of presence and being in relationship to those questions, where those questions fade away and they're no longer questions for you, that is the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to strive for the state of being where those questions fade away. And the reason I say that's the meaning of life is because I believe that is what those burning questions are trying to push us towards. When we're ascribing this feeling of reaching in ourselves to these nonsensical conceptions, to these irrational questions, we are asking ourselves a question. but we're asking ourselves a question of being and of action and of thought and of emotion and of presence. And the closest we can often get to a verbal expression of this deeper experiential question are those words. What's the meaning of it all? So our mind is trying to serve us. Like we're trying to figure it out. And that is often the best we can do, is a question like that. So we can actually be grateful for that question, and grateful for sort of the pain of like the paradoxical illusoriness of this, like, oh, wait, no, but okay, it feels okay, but no, but what about all this? What about all this? What about this? And we're doing our best, I believe. We're trying to figure it out. But to me, it's given me a lot of peace when I'm real. Okay, these thoughts, these words, they're representations in my mind, and seeing that they actually don't. Even saying it now, it's not fully satisfying in terms of the word, right? Because ultimately, just speaking and just having a thought is not the answer to the question, because the question itself is not just speaking. Again, it's a representation. So what I'm trying to do now is to represent my relationship with this representation in the hope that it might help you form new representations in your mind that then in turn could translate back into ways of being which might more fully answer your question for you. And for me right now, making this video is answering my question a little bit. Just doing this action of seeking to connect and make this video. And yeah, so that's the meaning of life. As far as I have thus been made aware. And when you're under the water, when you're swimming and you swim down to the bottom of the pool or the lake or wherever, and your lungs are burning and you're swimming up to the surface, you're generally not thinking about what the meaning of life is. But you do struggle. Yeah, I don't think this was everything I wanted to say, but I think it was a good start. And if even one person watches this and it's a little bit helpful, then and even if no one watches it, honestly, just for myself, this has helped me answer my question a little bit more today. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, or a good evening, or a good morning. All right, take care.